In every state in the United States, there are instructions that are written in large, thick books that judges use to instruct juries prior to their deliberations. These in our state, these are the California jury instructions. And it's a pretty thick, robust book because it's dependent on what kind of case it is and you know, all kinds of special circumstances and whatever is happening in that particular trial that is unique to that particular case. Well, there's probably going to be a set of instructions that's unique also that will be applied to that particular case. And there's hundreds of these, but I'm just going to pick out a few that I think are helpful, not only in assessing criminal trials, but also in assessing the case for the resurrection, which we're going to do in future sessions. But if you just master these rules of evidence, I think you're going to knock down a lot of skepticism before you even begin. And certainly, you're going to need these rules mastered if you want to be able to use evidence to communicate a case. This is one of those unique areas that I think I can help you with. I'll tell you, here's why I say that. Look, I came up through the arts, so I have a bachelor's degree in design and a master's degree in architecture. I call it architortric. That's what it felt like. But then I got a master's degree in theological studies. I did not get a master's degree in apologetics or a PhD in apologetics. I just have 30 years of working criminal cases in an epistemological laboratory called a courtroom, where we get to see how it is people accept a claim and know something is true. And we get to test our theories about epistemology and our theories about communication and our theories about how evidence can come together to convince somebody that something is true. And we fail sometimes and we succeed sometimes. And that learning process has now delivered me to this moment to help teach you how these rules can help you make a case. So look, historians can teach you, can present us with the facts of history. Astrophysics, physicists can give us the facts of cosmology. Biologists can bring us the facts of biology. Neuroscientists can help us to think about the facts of mind and brain. You know, all these specialists can come in and give you facts. And I'm none of those things. I'm the person who takes those facts and thinks about the rules of evidence and builds this case and tell you what the strength of the case might be given these specialized facts. So I'm not the guy who's going to give you the specialized fact. My goal is to help you assess and build cases as a case maker. That's the thing I can probably give you. And I recognized this a long time ago that that is going to be my limited role in the Christian community. I pass it on to you. It'll now be your duty to take that role to others. So here's the first evidence instruction. It's on your screen. There are only two categories of evidence. That's it. Just two. I'll make it simple for you. There is direct evidence, okay? And there is indirect evidence. That's it. Not surprising, right? Now, what are these two categories? What's in these two categories? Well, in direct evidence, you only have one kind of evidence. That comes down to eyewitness testimony. If I had somebody who had seen the entire thing occur, this crime occur, and can come in and testify to my jury and say, I was there, and I saw that dude do it, and I saw him, that guy sitting right over there, I saw him come in and do this crime. Well, I could make the entire case with one piece of physical evidence. I could do it with just her eyewitness testimony. Here we go. We've got a direct evidence case. Now, the second kind of category, indirect evidence, as it turns out, is everything else. That's right. If it's not an eyewitness, it's everything else. Fingerprints? Yeah. Indirect evidence. DNA? Indirect evidence. Now, we sometimes see people use the word direct. I need some direct evidence on that. If they're like forensic evidence like DNA, or no. That's not direct evidence. There's only one thing that qualifies as direct evidence. That's an eyewitness. So if you don't have an eyewitness, you're not going to have a direct evidence case. You have to make the entire thing on everything else. Behaviors, that's indirect. Statements he made, indirect. Everything is indirect unless you have an eyewitness who can say, I saw him do it. Now, by the way, you may have not heard this indirect evidence. We hear the expression direct evidence. Sometimes we hear the other expression because indirect evidence is also known, as you can see here, as circumstantial evidence. And that gets a terrible name. Would you agree? Most of the time, when we are talking about circumstantial evidence, it's in the context of hearing it on TV as like, okay, all they have is a circumstantial case. Yeah, it's just a circumstantial case. as if to say that that's not a very good case, because all it is circumstantial. Okay, I want to knock that down early, because if you think you're going to make a case for Christianity on the basis of something other than a circumstantial case, well, then you're going to think, well, all I have is a circumstantial. All I have is just circumstantial. No, circumstantial cases are great. They are awesome. Every case I have ever worked, every cold case I have ever worked has been entirely circumstantial. Did you know that? All those cases you've seen on Dateline. I think I've been on Dateline more than any other detective in the country. Not a single one of them was a direct evidence case. And we didn't lose any of them. Circumstantial evidence is powerful. Now I'm going to show you an example so you can see the difference. Now I'll go into much more detail on this as we begin to examine the case for the resurrection, but I just want to present the idea in your head of circumstantial evidence. Here's a case you can see on your screen. This young man has been accused of killing his girlfriend, and he killed his girlfriend with this baseball bat. Now there's two ways to make a case like this. I can make a case on the basis of somebody who saw him do the murder. If there's somebody across the street who saw him do the murder, and that person holds up under cross-examination, well, then I can make the entire case on the basis of one piece of evidence, her eyewitness testimony. That would be a direct evidence case. Are we clear on that? So that's the nature of direct evidence cases. They are entirely based on eyewitness testimony. Now, let's say she couldn't identify him because he's wearing a mask on his head or whatever. Now I've got to assemble the case based on other truths about his activities, whether he has access to the bat, what he was wearing, conditions around the house. We'll talk more about these in the next session or the session after that. But if I do this, all of this, you could say, well, look, I don't have an eyewitness. Is it possible that he's, yeah, of course it's still possible he's innocent, but what we're doing here is looking for what's reasonable, and we're going to build this case on the basis of what, here's maybe 7 or 8 pieces of indirect evidence. There's no eyewitness now. Now, I'll show you this later when we do this in an actual session, but I just want you to see this principle. This, when you're not using an eyewitness, you're using other pieces of evidence, behaviors, fingerprints, DNA, pieces of physical evidence you find in search warrants, things like this. This is known as a circumstantial evidence case. Now, just to make it clear, this is a diagram from the book you're reading, Cold Case Christianity. And of course, maybe you didn't know this, but I illustrate all my own books because, after all, I have this useless degree in design. And I might as well go ahead and try to use it for something. And so all it does for me is save me a few dollars on illustrators. Okay, so this is my illustration from Cold Case. And as you can see, there's 8 pieces of evidence that point to the same reasonable inference, this particular suspect. Now, if I was doing this in a criminal trial, I would not just have 8 pieces of evidence that point to him. I'd have 800 or 100 or whatever it would be. A huge number of... I call this death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? Because any one of these you might say, well, Jim, that doesn't seem like it's all that substantive, right? I mean, it's just one little thing. Well, yeah, but if everything points to him, this is really a reasonable inference, and it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. One paper cut may not kill you, but if you have 1,000, you better get some treatment. My point here is that this is how we build criminal cases. But more importantly, I love building these cases. And I love it for 2 reasons. Number one is that judges love circumstantial evidence. Judges, do you realize that about 70 to 80% of all cases, I think it's higher than that, but I'll just say with a low figure, 70 to 80% of all cases in America are entirely circumstantial. So we have to throw out a whole boatload of cases if we thought that circumstantial evidence was not good evidence. But we have a jury instruction for this. I'll show it to you on your screen. Judges actually tell juries all the time that they are to treat circumstantial evidence the same way they treat direct evidence. There's no difference in terms of value. Here's this instruction. You've got it right there. In California, he says both direct and circumstantial evidences are acceptable types of evidence. Neither is entitled to any greater weight than the other. So what this means is, in the past where you've been inclined to say, oh, all they have is a circumstantial case, stop saying that. Unless you're willing to say all they have is a direct evidence case. And you would never say that, because you thought direct evidence was really good. No, they're exactly the same. They're to be treated with the same value. This is helpful for us as Christians. Because even if I don't have somebody who can say, testify today, still alive, I saw this happen, we could build a case on something other than eyewitness testimony, something other than direct evidence, and we could still come to an incredibly reasonable inference with nothing but indirect evidence, because this happens in criminal trials every day. So I want you to kind of get your hands around that the standard that people sometimes hold to know something is much higher than it is in criminal trials. Criminal trials in which the thing we're studying is whether or not this defendant is guilty of a crime that might cause us to put him to death. That is the highest standard possible. If the standard that will determine whether this dude lives or dies is being used for a criminal trial, I think we could use that same standard to just determine, it's determining his temporal life. I think we could use it to determine our eternal life.